Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November 28th Educational Affairs Committee meeting. I will start the meeting with roll call. We can go around the table, starting with President Henry, please.
Present.
Jenny Loman, present.
Zachary Epps, present. Charles Bordeaux Williams, present.
Leah Mulhearn, present.
David Cohen, present. Dan Schultz, present.
Julie Hayward, present.
All right, thank you. And that is the last time we will hear our departing board members check in for roll call. Can we please move on to accept the minutes from the October Educational Affairs Committee meeting?
So moved.
Oh, Ms. Henry, second.
Comment.
Yes.
If we have a grassroots of a couple of the attendees that want to Zoom, just as a.
Yes, I can make that suggestion. Was there a second? I'm sorry. Yes, Jay, thank you. Moment. Great. With the vote. All those in favor of accepting the October 2023 minutes?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. And now we will move on to our presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Smith and her team. We have a full house here with lots of administrators. It's so good to see you all. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight's presentation for Educational Affairs, as you see on the screen, is all about student performance data and action plans. Specifically, we are focused on our standardized testing data from the spring as we inform our instruction and our next steps for the current school year. And as always, we recenter ourselves with our mission statement and vision statement, reminding ourselves as well as our school community, school district community, that all of our action steps, all the things that we do revolve around making sure we are true to our mission and vision of the Cheltenham School District. Tonight's agenda, it looks short, but tonight is going to be quite comprehensive. We are going to start with Dr. Reilly and Dr. Pimental giving us an overview on data analysis for continuous school improvement. We have also added an additional layer to show how professional learning and the half-day Wednesdays that was approved for this school year will be utilized in order to meet some of these goals. Number two, data and goals for the schools for the school year, 23-24 school year. And what we are going to do is at that point, stop and take questions, because the first half of the presentation is very general and school district specific. And then we will get into specific schools and their database, their school-based data analysis and action plan. So we will have our principals join us at the table to present the data and also action steps for their schools. And then there will be a second round of questions that will be specific to what the principals have shared during their respective presentations. And one of the things that I left out prior to Dr. Pimental starting, I did want to introduce to our school board of directors, as well as our public members who are here from the public in person, as well as those who are online. We do have two new members of our team who are in the Office of Innovation, and I'd like to introduce them really quickly. First, we have Ms. Katie Ferraro. Ms. Ferraro is our data and elementary curriculum specialist. Katie Ferraro is an internal candidate who moved up into the ranks to central office. So we're very happy to have her institutional knowledge and her familiarity with the school district. And then we also have with us Rachel German, and Rachel is our data and secondary curriculum specialist. And Rachel is not from the school district, which I think is a good thing to have a balance of both, someone who's bringing a different perspective and different experiences outside of the district. So we want to thank them both for being here with us tonight, and also for supporting tonight's presentation and also the work that comes out of the Office of Education. So thank you both for being here and welcome.
Thanks for having us.
And without any further delay, I turn things over to Dr. Pimental, who is going to walk us through the first half of our presentation.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So an introduction for this is, many of you know, we've been working on tightening up and improving the way that we use data and how we analyze and work with data within the district. And so what I'm going to be previewing for you in the next few slides is the work that we've been doing this year around improving those systems and procedures and where that's leading us to, where we hope to be, and also some sort of comments on what that means for tonight's presentation. So we've partnered with Victoria Bernhardt. She runs the Education for the Future Initiative, which is a nonprofit organization that is centered around helping schools use data to make decisions, essentially. She's one of the preeminent voices in that world. She's written over 20 books. If you look up continuous school improvement and data, her name just comes up. She's one of those people. And her organization in particular has worked with Pennsylvania specifically. As I'm sure you know, we have the Pennsylvania Core as opposed to the Common Core and some of the other particularities of Pennsylvania. And so her organization has tailored some of its approaches to the needs of Pennsylvania districts. So it's good for us for that reason as well. And also their general approach is sort of holistic, which I'll get into in a moment. So this is a quote that comes from their organization and is sort of the anchoring point for this particular method for using data. And I know it's always bad form to read from a slide, but in this case I will. If our sole improvement strategy is reacting to negative test results, anything not traditionally tested is marginalized. And so anyone in the educational sphere is familiar with this around organizations that become solely focused on standardized test scores. And so then everything else that doesn't improve standardized test scores gets pushed off. And the whole thing becomes, can you memorize and regurgitate the skills and the content that show up on the PSSA? And as long as you can do that, then everyone gives you a pat on the back and everything else disappears. Music, the arts, holistic subjects, how to think, all those kinds of things will get dropped off. So this methodology is a way to ensure that that doesn't happen. And it's a way of using data, which sounds sort of cold and depersonalized, but it's a way to use data in a way that is holistic and doesn't fall into that trap. So this is a year-long process. The graphic on the right, which you don't need to be able to read, it's just a representation of a more or less linear process that takes approximately a full school year to work through the first time. And so we're kind of on our way working through that. I'd say we're roughly about halfway at this particular point in time. The real sort of key to this is that the essential details of it are what you would find in any change theory book that you might read. It's the same things. There's just sort of certain particularities to it that allow it to operate slightly differently. So just to give you the real key piece to this is this idea of using multiple measures. So everyone's familiar with the bottom circle, which is student learning or student performance. That's your standardized test scores. Of course, you have to look at that. That's a measure of success. But in addition to that, you have the perceptions of students, the perceptions of staff, the perceptions of the community. We have all of the demographic data that we have on individual students, schools, the district as a whole, the shifting demographics in different locations and places, and all of the ways that affects the institution and the decision-making that goes along with that. And lastly, school processes and procedures, which are all of the things that happen inside the school day that make the school function and run. So being able to look at all four of those things as integrated and working together as what we mean when we say data. So data doesn't mean English scores, period. It means all of these things together when we're talking about an individual student or a school or the district overall. So that's really the essence or the heart of the whole thing. And then ultimately, that information gets plugged into something that's called the program evaluation tool. Again, the details are way out of the scope of this conversation today, but the idea that for the community and for everyone to understand is that you use the multiple measures to design and build and improve the ways that the school functions, and that there's a procedure to make that happen. the most important part of all of this is that this process, in addition to being holistic, is a method to democratize the way that we make decisions in the schools and to improve the way that ownership happens with regard to staff and students. This is the antithesis of a system that would be used by a few administrators in a room with the door that's closed. This is a way to bring in staff, to get them to have ownership over student performance and other processes within the building, and to have them take ownership over that. And that this whole thing is about distributing that ownership outward. That's a big part of the work. As the board knows, you have been gracious enough to grant us extra Wednesdays for the purposes of professional development. A lot of the work that's going into this, a lot of the data analysis and the process of evaluating the programs and systems of the school are happening on the early dismissal Wednesdays that have been added to the calendar this year. And some of the big lifts around this work are occurring during our standard full day in-service days that have always been on the calendar. So that's kind of where a lot of that time and where some of this work is happening. And then just a note around today's presentation. I've just presented to you this whole idea of these multiple measures, this holistic democratic notion of using data to make decisions, so on and so forth, but we're only halfway through that process. And to give you a presentation today about multiple measures would not be authentic, because we're not at the point where we can say that we're doing that in a realistic way. And so today's presentation to you is going to be centered on student performance data, because that's what we have always done. That's what we're still doing. We still care about student performance data. I just want to clarify, it's like, why did you hear all this? And then we go into a discussion about student performance data. It's because we're not ready to really share in a different way yet. We would expect that by the time we have this meeting next year, it'd be a different kind of conversation. And so we're working on that now, but we haven't gotten there yet.
So I'm going to transition into a little bit more specifics around the data and then the goals and or targets that you're going to hear directly from the principals as it relates to their buildings. So just to kind of give some background in terms of where this is all coming from and how those targets were established. And so the main source for the data, you'll see 2 data points for each content and grade level that is tested at each school. The first of which will be a measure of student performance, as Dr. Pimental had mentioned, which comes directly from the Future Ready PA Index, which is a dashboard developed by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. That dashboard was created, and the idea of having these short-term and long-term goals comes out of the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was established by the U.S. Department of Ed. And so a number of the indicators that are on the Future Ready dashboard are dictated to the state by the U.S. Department of Ed. PA, though, has also added additional indicators. So in total, there are 12 indicators within the student performance realm that we're going to be talking about. U.S. only requires 6 of those. So the state does monitor additional data that they don't have to. We're not going to talk about all of that because we're going to focus on school performance. So you're going to see a school performance measure, which is simply the % of students who scored proficient and advanced in math and ELA for grades 3 through high school, and then science as well for grades 4, 8th, and biology at the high school. In addition to the information that's shared on the dashboard, they also provide the statewide average in those areas, so for a comparison standpoint. And then they also show the statewide goal. The goal right now is a 2033 goal. That was just updated. It was a 2030 goal. Within the last couple of weeks, they've moved that goal to 2033. And so with that, they also provide yearly interim goals, or yearly interim targets is the way they refer to those. And those targets are in relation to the various accountability indicators. And so, for example, the interim targets for this current school year coming from the state, and this is for all grade levels. So when we look at ELA, it doesn't matter what grade you're in or what school you're in Pennsylvania. The target of 70.3% is the same for everybody. Right? Likewise, the 2033 or long-term goal of 81.1 is the same for everybody. Same is true for both math and science. This is a table, one of several that the state provides to us, just to show you that we're not looking at just an all student group. This breaks down the same types of targets for all the different demographic groups. And these subgroups are by race and then also by program. And so we're structuring our own data tracking to mimic what the state is also expecting of us. And so we do have this same data for our demographic by race groups and our demographic by program groups. Just to highlight again, so you can see this a little better, the left-hand column are those different groups that we have data for. And then also the targets that the state is indicating for 2024 for each of those groups. So every group has its own target. This is just ELA as an example. We have the same table for math and science. There are some other indicators that we're not lumping in with student performance around college and career and ELs and some other areas that we're not focusing on. While I say that, EL data is included in the student performance data, but there are some other measures that they are tracking as well as it relates to our English learners. So before we get into the building specific goals and primarily action plans is where we want to focus in terms of what changes are being implemented, is where did the targets come from? So we could have just taken the targets from the state and utilized those, but what we did instead is we went back and we looked at our benchmark performance. And so we have historical performance, but primarily for now, we only have our fall benchmarks for this school year. We're about to launch into another cycle of benchmarking pretty soon. And so we'll get another layer of data, but we wanted to consider our historical benchmark performance as it relates to or correlates to standardized test data as well. In addition to that, we do have performance and growth for PSSAs and Keystone. So again, looking at our historical performance there and thinking about what growth have we already demonstrated. So when we're thinking about attainable goals, we have a number in mind based on what we've done in the past. The first two bullets may suggest or indicate that we're going to have some areas in some schools where our targets are not going to be the same as the state's. They're going to fall short of the state's goals because the gap between where we need to get to in 2033 and where we are today is greater than where the state's starting. And so we had to adjust our targets to accommodate for that. There are areas where our goal, our target is the same as, we're very similar to the state's goal because we're right in line with where they are today. And then on the other end, we also have a few areas where we have already exceeded the 2024 interim goal. And in a few cases, we've already exceeded the 2033 goal. And so we don't want to just sit on those numbers. We also want those areas to grow. And so bullet 3 is just having a goal of continuous school improvement, regardless of where we are today. We always want to see improvement. And so we have a goal or a target for those areas where we've already exceeded the state's expectations as well. And then the last piece here, just some things that we need to think about moving forward and actually looking backward, just the lingering effects of COVID-19 and the impact that they have had on primarily our high school accountability. I know there's learning loss, instructional loss embedded in this, but from a pure data standpoint, what happens with the high school is a little different than what we see for the other schools, because the high school only reports grade 11 cohort accountability data. So when we look at the data from Future Ready, you're not going to see 9th grade Outer One Keystone in the spring or in the winter. You're going to see grade 11 regardless of when the test was taken, meaning if a 9th grader takes a biology test, that score is banked until they're an 11th grader, and then it's reported in the dashboard. What happened though with COVID was there were waivers that were implemented to account for the fact that the state canceled the test. And then we had our schools were hybrid for a period of time, and so we didn't have all of our students testing. What that means is any of those students who were in courses, trigger courses, that would have been a Keystone course, that data is just now starting to show up in the Future Ready dashboard. And so I just want everyone to be aware when we look at the high school data, keep that in mind that that data is representative of our current grade 11 cohort. Okay. Other things that we are keeping in mind as well is anytime standards are changing, how is that going to impact the targets that we've established and how we're trying to approach that long-term goal for 2033. We know that the science standards are changing. The state says they have changed. That's not exactly true because they're still making updates to those standards. So it's making it difficult for districts to make adjustments to prepare for those. What we do know is the state has applied to the U.S. Department of Ed to move the 4th grade science PSSA to 5th grade. And we have no idea what kind of impact that might have on the way that we establish our targets and goals for the future. The other thing is just the assessments themselves change. And in just one example of that, something that we're doing now is monitoring, and happens after the test, so we can't predict what will be on the current test, but we do know in reports from the state what domains and standards are being tested and how often. So we can look at the number of questions are being asked of our students in different areas. That allows us to think about where our emphasis might need to shift as we look at the trends and how the assessments are being administered. With that, we're going to pause before we bring the principals up and open it up for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Reilly, Dr. Pimental, and Dr. Smith. Do you have any questions from board members first? Ms. Hayward?
This is really more of an observation than a question, and this is nothing that we can, well, we can maybe partially control it, but when I look at the interim measurements of interim progress, and I look at the student groups. So for example, for the African American student group, we have an interim progress in 2024 of 50.4, with 2025 as 52.4. You compare that to the white interim progress of 76.4 and 77.4, just as an example. As you continue progressing, it's almost unrealistic that that gap is going to be made up. And so I would hope that we, in looking at the data, can look at our interim progress, like you said, in those situations where we can exceed those targets and continue pushing forward, because otherwise it seems like an impossible gap to make up. And we're basically selling a vast majority of our student population short. And again, I know that this data, I know that we were looking at other measures of success, but that struck me as being very troubling to me. Not at all a comment on your presentation or your presentation, but just an observation of where the state starts is really not acceptable from my perspective.
And I was going to say, and that's part of the reason why we built in some of the other instructional practices that we built in, because we too share your observation and your concern, which is why we had the win period, which is why we built in that flexible scheduling that we really fought hard to have, to make sure that we have additional time. That's why we're offering free tutoring in all of our schools for all of our children, regardless of their performance levels, because we do realize that if we follow that pathway, there are going to be a lot of students who don't meet that target, and that's not okay. That's not good enough for us.
I was just going to add, the state's numbers are a simple calculation. That's all they've done. The way this all began is they took the 2015, 2016, and 2016, 2017 data, averaged those two together, and established a baseline. And then they set goals for the future, divided it over the number of years, and came up with their minimum targets. And they didn't. What the advantage we have is we can think about the students that we serve. Right? They're providing a number for every school.
No, I totally appreciate that. Yeah, and when you look at the English learners, it's low.
And may I just add one more thing too? Another thing that we work really intentional about is updating our curriculum documents, our scope and sequence, to make sure that we are setting students up and also equipping our teachers with the right information in front of them to give high level and high engagement activities and work for students, so that we can make up more ground in a shorter amount of time. So the curriculum rewrite and the dedication to new resources that are not only just culturally representative of our population. We're also making sure that we're giving challenging assessments, challenging instruction, challenging assignments to students so that we can make up more of that ground. So everything that we've done in the Office of Education has been intentional, knowing that a large population of our students need to make up a lot of growth that has been kind of in the making for some time.
Thank you. So again, no comment, no reflection on the district.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Mr. Khan?
Just a suggestion on slide 15, 16, took me a minute to figure out what that meant. If you can add the header as a suggestion from slide 14, that there's statewide performance goals to slides 15 and 16, especially when the presentation sits by itself after this meeting, I think it would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mr. Brunel.
Yeah, not a comment directly about the presentation itself, but more about the lagging data points and the timing. I know that if you look at Future Ready PA's website, they kind of tell you when the data is being pulled and what dates. All of it is very much in retro, right? And so I'm just thinking if has there been any conversations or is there any knowledge of any drive to try to shrink that, right? Kids take the SAT and other exams and they get their results back in 30 days. And I know there's not a huge data crunch. That's more of an individualized experience. But I'm just curious why, if anyone knows, if not, I will go and find more information. I'm good at that part. But why the delay? Because it's just like, I don't know. It's kind of unnecessary. It's like right now, what are we actually waiting for? It's not a question for you. That wasn't an question, but
Well, we can, so similar to SATs, we do get either the Keystone and the PSSA results faster than the updates to the dashboard.
Yeah.
Part of the issue with the dashboard is there is a summer administration of Keystones that some schools take advantage of. And so there is that data that's not coming out until I think that the window for that is the end of July.
Yep.
And so that data may become available sometime in August, September. I don't know how consistent they are with when they release the Future Ready data, but there is a little bit of a lag partially because of that testing cycle that goes all the way through the summer. One thing that to kind of focus on though, especially when the principals come up, there are a lot more other data points that are being considered. And there's constant monitoring through either the benchmarks or common assessments that are part of this whole continuous improvement process. And so it's really about what are the plans that principals have in terms of the improvement, regardless of some of the performance data, but what's right for our students in terms of the learning process.
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you. Not the part that it takes them a long time.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that.
That's fine, but no, I get it. Okay. Yep, appreciate that. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps.
So I'll just not reiterate, but just I'm more shocked that the 2033 goals across race are not closer together. I don't really understand why their goals for 10 years from now would be so different. And I again know you can't answer that, but I'm very confused. I'm going to try to follow up afterwards. In addition to the goals, do they provide any supports or guidelines on how to meet these goals? So are these, is the framework of these goals saying here is the methodology that we are recommending schools approach or tools?
So there's a couple things. And I'll mention coming up in 2 weeks, Brian Campbell, who's the director at PDE, will be presenting on the Future Ready dashboard. And we have a team of people going to that presentation. Typically that gets repeated at the data summit as well. So they do offer conferences and sessions during those conferences that address some of this. This year, actually, there's a lot of STEELS, science standards, a lot of workshops around that in terms of helping support districts around the work of improvement within science. The SAS website itself, Standards Aligned System from PDE, is another resource that we reference a lot. The benchmark that we administer is the CET, which is a state-designed assessment. They link in supports as well. And so one of the things we get a lot around the benchmark is, well, I didn't do well in this area, but I don't know what the questions were that I was asked. What they do is they'll provide you samples, so you can kind of link right into those samples and address, specific deficiencies for individual students that way. In terms of seeing these goals and what are we doing for every one of these subgroups, I've not come across a lot of support from the state in that sense, though. More from a curricular instructional standpoint, and then they kind of leave it to districts to say, where do you need to put your emphasis? One thing I'll point out again in this data is if you were to look at the numbers from left to right, the amount of change by percentage points is constant over the length of this program. If you were to look at the percent change, it decreases over time. Right now, we don't plan to do that. Our percent change is higher in most cases than what the state's expecting. And if we were to maintain that level of percent increase, we can close those gaps in a much more efficient way than what the state proposed.
And then we have a strategic plan, and I know it's a living, intended to be a living document, and I wonder if once the district is finalized where these goals fit in, if there is a supplementary update to the strategic plan to align with year over year that we should be hitting these goals as part of the metrics.
So in terms of these specific goals, not necessarily, but in terms of building a system for us to monitor this and make the adjustments, that is part of the strategic plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Epps?
Not a question, just more of a zooming out a little bit. Yeah, zooming out a little bit. Just, and it's timely, we just got a hand copy of reviewing things with a lens for equity. So I wanted to point out, as you go through a checklist, there's things we can check off that list. If we go through your presentation, the use of disaggregated data is one way of advancing or having conversations and advancing equity, closing gaps. I would encourage folks to zoom in when you do have a chance, because some of the questions that are being asked, who does this program benefit? Who does it not benefit? The timeline, all of it. Again, you can check off the list some of the practices around ensuring that you're having conversations about what really matters and different layers of equity as we look down the list. Students with disabilities, English learners, so different aspects of equity. Certainly appreciate that. Also appreciate the honesty in terms of a snapshot in terms of where we are as a district. In the other graphic, which I would encourage folks to zoom into that one as well in terms of the questions that are being asked for continual improvement. And I appreciate even in this conversation around targets, because they're only, there's useful to a certain extent. And there's an honesty here around where we are in our process, how we can use these numbers, and even how we can surpass what these targets are. And so that's certainly encouraging. And as we hear from principals in a little bit, it all aligns with what we see on the screen. So the continuity from big picture, what we're hearing, what we're trying to do, create some systems, we can also start to see it in the presentations from at the school level as well. So just encouragement, keep going. It's not easy when it's very technical the way you describe it, but it's really a large scale culture change, and that's not easy at all. So keep headed in the direction you're headed.
Thank you. So I'll say one of the ways that I have processed this to make it less technical is the 2033 goal. I'm thinking my son he's in 7th grade, he would be a junior in college by the 2033 goal. So that, keeping that in mind, reminds me that we have to move faster, because I'm looking at him, he's 12.
Yeah.
And so if we're talking about 2033 and I'm talking about a junior in college, that's quite some time. So we do have some ground to make up in a shorter amount of time than what this pace will get us.
I appreciate that, Dr. Smith, also having a 7th grader. So now I'll be here before we know. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? I'll move to questions from the public, anyone that's in the room or anyone that is on Zoom. If you could please state your name and where you live in the district before you speak.
Hi, I'm Mia Blitzstein. I live in Elkins Park, and I just wanted to clarify / confirm what I heard about the grade 11 information. So that the tests that have been banked there, technically kids could have been taking that test like up to 2 or even 3 years after they took the class. Is that correct?
Technically, students should be taking just the year that they're enrolled in a trigger course. So when they're in Algebra 1, they would take, the 1 instead.
I just mean because of COVID, because of the pause in testing, when we see the data for this year's.
So one of the issues with the banked data is some of that banked data is a waiver. Meaning students who were in a trigger course when COVID hit, never took the test unless they say they're proficient.
Got it. Okay, so will next year's grade 11 data be more accurate in terms of kids who are actually taking the test
So,
when they're
according
taking the class?
According to the state, we will still have a couple more years of the impact of the waiver and influencing what those accountability numbers are.
Thank you.
We're not there yet.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Brazilian?
Just a quick follow-up. Did I hear that the banked data for someone with a waiver is applied as proficient?
Yes.
That's what you said? Okay.
If you pass the course, if a student passed the course, the trigger course, then they were identified as proficient. And it was banked. So if we had a 7th grader in Algebra 1, where there was no test and they passed Algebra 1, that data is banked until they're in 11th grade.
So it doesn't show up as, it's not a lack of data, it's just made up, sort of, not made up, but a placeholder.
Sounds later.
Yeah.
The other part that
It's not apples to apples.
if we were to be looking at scale scores, also, we don't have a score for any of the students because they're just labeled with a word.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Any other questions from the public or anyone here? Nothing on Zoom.
There's no questions.
Awesome, thank you. Any other board members? All right, thank you for that portion, and I think we are ready to move on.
All right, so we're going to move through the schools in by level, K through 12, and alphabetical. So, Mr. Knott, you're up first.
Excited to be here. Thank you for giving me this half hour. My colleagues just got extremely nervous. No, we have it limited to 5 minutes. So, taking a breath. So I'm Stephanie Janad. I am the newest member of the Cheltenham School District family. I have been here since August. I have been honored and blessed to be here and to come with years of experience in continuous school improvement. And one thing that I love that the district here is doing is saying continuous. Because if you just say school improvement, it's an indication that something may not be going well. If you say continuous, then you know that this is a continuous journey that we are all on. So one of the things that we say every day at Cheltenham Elementary is, who are we? And any student will respond and say CES, that we are caring, exceptional, and safe. And we say every day over the loudspeaker, remember today that you are loved. Because regardless of what any data shows, that we want to make sure that all of our students feel that they are loved, they are accepted for who they are, and that they are brilliant in their own way. That being said, I can say for Mr. F's students who go to Cheltenham Elementary and for Damien's parent that you spoke to on the bus, this is not acceptable. This is not an indication of who our students are. But one thing that I have shared multiple times that, we know change is hard. So new leadership coming in is hard for me, it's hard for the staff. And one thing that I believe as a family is, what do we look at that is already working? And it's really important to value that. And then what do we put in place so we can put some real-time things in to see exactly where we are, to show in the moment evidence of what is happening. So, for example, as we look at this as our PSSA data, we don't want to look at it as we're training students for the test. That's the last thing we want to do. That just takes away their fire. But what do we do to make sure that while we're igniting their fire, they are able to showcase what they know on a test? Because every parent wants their child to get that result. And there's nothing more disheartening than a teacher who's working and working and working, and what they're doing is not being showcased. So some real-time things, and I know you can't read all of this up here, but I just wanted to be able to share. For example, where we were when we came in, when I arrived, is that MTSS was happening. But what was happening in MTSS is that it was kind of under, there were very few kids on the list. They didn't really understand that. And it was because those who were on the list were those who were referred to special education, which is very important because kids who need that need those extra supports. What wasn't on the list that we are now in real time have quadrupled are all of the students that receive multiple supports, and we do bridge those gaps. We get them where they need to be, and that's the purpose of MTSS, is to exit them out. So where we were to where we are is already showing an impact. What that is now allowed is for the whole, all stakeholders to come together for the whole child. So for example, what I learned in last year's meetings, it was grade level meetings happening. The 4 first grade teachers, the 4 second grade teachers, which is fantastic. But where's the specialist teacher? Where's the intervention teacher? Where's the gifted teacher? Because they are as integral in what happens in the student's day. So now we're looking at how does everybody sit together and create that plan? And that's bridging a gap of silos, because what happens is staff is trying to get together and they're flying by each other in the hallway and they're emailing at night, and that's not as integral as this flexible scheduling. So thank you for those every other Wednesdays and having that ability to now have really creative measures of how we bring people together so that they can work together. And what it resulted in, to give you a piece of evidence, just today I had a teacher reach out and say, can we go over to Winco and see what's happening in second grade? So we have collegiality happening there. I had another teacher reach out and say, hey, our interventionist who's pulling, can she come in and can she give a lesson because she's teaching it in a different way that I've never taught? For teachers to be that vulnerable is a really big ask, especially veteran teachers. And we're seeing that happen because they love the kids so much. I know we're probably getting close to my 5 minutes. Okay, grade team meetings and the PD agenda to support co-planning. Bringing together this special education teacher, the intervention teacher, the specialist. This is where the magic happens. So you have, just to give you an example, so your child, Mr. Epps, your child is in the homeroom class, and they get their small group instruction from their teacher in literacy. And then during WIN, they may be pulled out by an interventionist to get literacy. And then they go back, and there may be a disconnect, because if they haven't had a chance to co-plan, they're not then practicing the skills they just learned to build that muscle memory. So bringing them together so that the student's day goes from skill to skill to skill that they need, that is where the magic of the data going up happens. And the one thing I say every day to the staff, and I thank you for this because I walked into this, you gave it to me, the expertise we need is in that room. It's in the district, it's in Cheltenham Elementary School. It's just how do we bring it together so that it's aligned through the systems that go through the day. Some of the students may say that I'm the crossing guard, even though they see me as the principal every day, because they also see me directing traffic. Mr. F sees it all the time. So I remind them of who I am, but in case they think I'm the crossing guard, just kind of go with that. So one of the other things I really looked at from where we walked into to where we are now is an audit, and then I'll wrap it up just to give you a real-time example, is an audit of what's happening in the building throughout the day. So looking at, as Dr. Smith pointed out, looking at that curriculum, what are they doing kindergarten, first, second, third, before they move on to the next level of schooling, to make sure that they are having the same programming. Because if in one grade they're doing a certain program, and then it goes to the next grade and they do another program, it's automatically kind of taking that consistency away, and looking at how those things can be built so we've already done an audit to make sure that we're all using the same thing, which is what led to saying, hey, I need you to go over to Winco and see something type of thing. So that's been a really, really exciting process. And the last thing I would say is to be able to just have that opportunity to look at the balanced literacy block and the math science block. Again, what is happening in the classrooms so that is one teacher using a certain amount of time for guided reading and or SGI, and another teacher is using a certain amount of time for shared reading, and how do we bring that together? Just little tweaks through walkthroughs, little tweaks of how do you format your questioning during that really exciting poem so that it looks like PSSA format. So then that way you're not teaching to the test, you're using what you're doing, but you're showcasing what they need to see. So they're just some practical examples of what's happening in Cheltenham Elementary right now to get us from where we are to where we need to be. And thank you for giving me the time to speak to you about that today.
Really quick, as the next principal comes forward, just to make sure we get it on the record, SGI is small group instruction.
Good evening, everyone. All right, so my presentation is kind of short because I've said to my team, let's try to do what we did last year and do it better. And so really not trying to make any waves. We had some good systems and procedures and protocols in place. And so we're revisiting those, evaluating the things that went well, the things that didn't go well. And so I just want to just kind of start by saying I celebrate my staff. I was very excited by our results and the growth that we made last year. And it really was a collective effort of the teachers, the support staff, and the families in the way in which they supported the student community. And so a couple of things that we are revisiting and trying to make sure, in addition to the things that Dr. Pimental shared about analyzing multiple measures of data, looking at disaggregated data and analyzing and figuring out the root cause analysis. Block scheduling is a big thing that we're doing, giving more time for active pedagogy, for students to be engaged. So 80-minute literacy period, 80-minute math period. So teachers can really break down the components, have that SGI, that small group instructional time, have that time for more conversations and talk amongst students. We always say that, you know, the person who's doing the most talking is doing the most learning. And so we want to shift the dynamic from teachers kind of being the sage on the stage to students engaging with one another and building that collaborative community. Also, MTSS are our MTSS liaison. So we have kid talk meetings. We had each liaison loop with their grade. So kindergarten liaison is now in first grade is now in second, so forth and so on. So they are an expert, if you will, to the new teachers in terms of the history of our students and how they're being serviced, that we're not starting all over again, that we're not, you know, starting from scratch. And so to be able to provide some historical data to the new teachers, but also to have a continuum of services to make a determination. Are we just at maintenance now, or do we need to move further for more information? So that's been really helpful. We're evaluating our ELA instruction in third grade around vocabulary acquisition and use, really looking at how we're using read alouds. For some reason, as we get older, we think that we don't have to read. The students get older, we stop with the storybooks, but there's so much in terms of vocabulary and building experience there. So we want to make sure that we're still doing robust read aloud opportunities in third and fourth grade. Also, we for fourth grade, we're also looking at that text dependent analysis. And to be honest with you, similar to what we did in math, we're really making that a school-wide, a K-4 piece, text dependent analysis. Starting with kindergarten, how we look at pictures as a text, what kind of information are they drawing from it, so that it builds throughout each year. The next thing is for our math instruction, we also are continuing. We started last year and we're continuing with the math talks. I talked to you all last year about these 5-minute math routines that we do in the beginning of math. It has transformed our math classrooms. Every student sees themselves as a mathematician. Not only that, I would venture to say, in addition to the skills that the students are learning, part of their growth this year in math is around the joy that they have in math. Like, they are excited. They want those 5 minutes to extend to 15 and 20 minutes. And so walking into a math classroom and seeing the joy, I think has really contributed to aligning themselves with that skill. And then the other piece, I think, is really just the PD. I would say is the last thing is like providing ongoing professional development around, for this year, we're really focusing on structured literacy. So shifting the balance, we've been a big balanced literacy school district. And so now we're looking at that science of reading and like figuring out, not totally throwing out balanced literacy, but like, what are some of the skills that we need to sort of prepare ourselves for as the state shifts to structured literacy? And with that, we've aligned that time of literacy K-2 so that students can move where they need to move, especially during foundations, to get the instruction that they need. So that's been helpful. Other PD opportunities also result in teachers. We survey them in August and see what do they think they need. And so we provide those bite-sized opportunities for teachers as well. So I guess to just sort of sum it up, one other big thing that we're continuing is the WIN plans. So our WIN time is really teachers plan that time using that disaggregated data and figuring out what are the small groups that I'm going to have during WIN, and what are the SMART goals that they're having. And then every Friday is a progress monitoring day. So we give time for teachers and interventionists all to kind of meet together and talk if they need to, provide PD if they need to, around their WIN. And we're constantly revisiting that so that those groups can become and remain fluid. So schedule time to talk. The MTSS liaisons not starting from scratch, really dialing in on our instructional practices, making sure that there's use of active pedagogy, and then providing the professional development that teachers need to keep moving our programs along. And I would say too, our scores are, the PSSA is important, and but we're also really interested in growing and developing good humans. And so I'm just really proud of the team and the way in which they, beyond the PSSAs, the ways that they are showing multiple measures of growth as human beings.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to highlight some of the things that we are doing at Myers Elementary School as a school team to continue to support the growth of our students. I'm very excited about the continuous school improvement plan and our collective efforts to look at the multiple measures as it relates to me developing as an administrator, our staff developing as educators. I am a hammer meets the nail type of person. Give me a stick of gum and a string and a deadline, I'll get you a book, whatever you need. But as I grow as an administrator and we as a staff look at multiple measures in order to figure out how we can best support students' development, it has really been enlightening, and it's been a joy for me to work with our teachers and staff as they go on this journey with us. As I said, it's not the natural way that I think, but I think the intentionality about how we are looking at multiple measures in order to support growth of our students, as I look at the MTSS process, as I look at the continuous school improvement plan, and now we're seeing that same thing even at the classroom level. So I'm excited about that work. And as Dr. Robinson said, there's many things that we are continuing and very proud to continue to grow in at Myers and tuning things. I'm very appreciative of the feedback that we receive from surveys from parents that we continue to look at as a staff, the student surveys that we're utilizing in order to help inform our instruction and to help inform our school climate and our school culture, and the surveys that were provided by teachers that gave us information as to what they need in order to help students grow as well. There's a lot of things that we're trying to do that if I were to kind of put them into silos, we're trying to continue to establish our culture around data. And what that data is not just school improvement scores, as everyone has said. It is including attendance. It is including demographics. It includes student input, conversations with students at town halls. An example of that will be as a result of the survey that we were able to give students over the summer, we were able to develop 4 after-school clubs for first and second grade that we know are tuned directly into their interest. That might seem minimal, but as we're able to increase attendance through kids loving coming to school, increase their focus, increase their engagement, increase their excitement across learning, and to translate the things that we're doing in the classroom across disciplines and across rooms and across topic areas, we'll see growth, whether it be during the school day, whether it be in a club or an activity such as problem solving with Legos or even the dance team. We're hoping to reach the total child by making sure that their school experience is rich in rigor and a warm, loving, and student-centered environment. With that, there's a lot of work that we are doing with our teachers. A lot of it is opening up the dialogue that we're having between administrators and the teachers, as well as teachers with one another, and structuring opportunities for them to have meaningful, authentic engagement conversations around student data, around best practices in an environment that is safe, that is welcoming, and that they know is meant to benefit the children. I love Myers, and I love the community of educators and students and parents that we have there, and how they are all type A, but they work together so well as it relates to respecting the abilities that each other bring to the table, because our common goal is the success of all students. So I am very grateful for the way that they welcome me into their classrooms, that I, as a principal, you know that there's always a stage of performance, but then we get to that authentic teaching when the curtain comes down and we're able to kind of have that dialogue. I really appreciate the authenticity of our dialogues about student data, best practices regarding instruction, and I want to continue to have that streak go both ways as it relates to how I can support them with whether it be whole group instruction, the formation of groups, disaggregation of data. All of those things are things that we are dialoguing about and being intentional. That leads me to that data culture, but the second thing is our collaboration. I am excited about the work that we are doing as it relates to continuing to prove in the area of aligning our efforts as it relates to assessment, as it relates to parent communication, as it relates to instruction, and then using our collective abilities, whether it be a grade team, whether it be as a paraprofessional, whether it be as a speech and language therapist, to have a single language and unify our efforts to support children across learning environments. As Dr. Robinson said, that comes through structuring opportunities such as our weekly Wednesdays in order to give teachers opportunities to collaborate. We are endeavoring to work towards common grade level assessments, and it is a journey. And it comes with a lot of time, understanding, meeting people where they are in order to plan backwards from that standard to come up with a meaningful assessment and to align teaching from classroom to classroom in order to achieve that common goal. I love the fact that teachers are willing to do that work and to include their own aspects of rigor that goes beyond just the scope of what is there on the paper. Their approach and their best practices include not just the basics. We're not talking multiple choice. We're talking a holistic approach to the literacy block, or a holistic approach to the math block, where there is demonstration learning, where there's application, where there's a focus on the why and the how of math, and also as well as things such as process. Continue to use our grade teams as a time to have that collaboration and to emphasize, I know for math, geometry was an area of needed growth for us. In 3rd and 4th grade. I know for literacy, we needed to work on vocabulary and acquisition. So when we did part of our continuous school improvement plan, and we started to brainstorm what were the things that we can solve and what things we were out of our control and inside of our control, teachers were able to look at the data and start to make some of those decisions and reflect on their practice, not just individually, but as a team, as to what they can do in order to focus on a specific area. And some of those answers are very simple. It might be as simple as a scope and sequence or a timeline when a specific topic is taught, but some of those areas require us to look at that multiple measure summary when we talk about vocabulary and acquisition, and when we talk about the resources that we're using in the classroom. The increase in ELL students that we're seeing in our buildings every day, some of those larger pictures require me to go beyond the data that is the typical data and look at those multiple measures in order to create an action plan that is sufficient. We're utilizing grade level planning, we're utilizing before and after school tutoring, and we are utilizing the data, not just by the teachers, but by the students in the form of creating goals. And I'm just excited to continue to tune and tweak in order to support our students as we go forward.
Thank you.
What do you clock in?
7 minutes, 21 seconds.
Let's talk stress.
Also, that's the longest time.
You know, it's continuous. Continuous.
It's getting better. Closing the. I'll have metrics next year on that. First data point, probably will.
Sure is. So as I promised you last week, I'd be back, and here I am. So last week we had an opportunity to share with you some of the perception and different perspectives from different voices of our Winco community. And tonight we have a chance to look at our student achievement data. So one of the things about being principal of a school that starts with W is that everything they've said, ditto. I don't want to highlight everything on this action plan. I do want to highlight some things that aren't there that should be there. One of the questions that we find ourselves asking each other at Winco is if we want to do things differently, if we want different results, what do we have to do differently? If we're happy with the way things are, we can just continue the status quo. But if we want to see growth and student achievement, we need to do things differently. We did meet with some measure of success last year, so there are certain things in this plan that we will continue to highlight and do as best practices. But some things I want to specifically highlight for you are around social emotional learning. We need to continue to focus on the whole child. COVID still is a real event. We like to think of it as being in the rearview mirror. It's not. It's right in front of our faces. And we see the effects of that, particularly with our youngest learners, in terms of being able to appropriately interact with each other. So we're going to continue to work on that. We continue to work on that in our classrooms through various read-alouds that teachers pick for their morning meeting time in particular that highlight social emotional learning. When we looked at the disaggregated data, we saw that our special education students are really struggling around in reading and math. We are fortunate enough to be working with the Office of Special Education and piloting the iReady reading and math, but we're definitely focusing on the reading at Winco this year. And along with that, we're being very intentional about differentiating our collection in the library so that it's much more reflective and culturally responsive than what is there now. We have taken a very critical look at our schedule in hopes of being very intentional about our small group time, instructional time. Often it's been assumed that our teachers are doing small group work, but on my walkthroughs and observations last year, going in at different times of the day, whatever time I went in, I never saw small group work. So this year I have built into, and been accused of being a little bit of a micromanager, surprise, surprise, that there is built-in time for every teacher to have small group instruction in reading and math and WIN. And they should be seeing lots of different children in all three of those sections. And one thing we are also working on is building some family involvement around our literacy programs particularly. And this year we were lucky enough to receive a grant from the Cheltenham Foundation to do a Winco One Book, One Read, which will be coming out in January. So for anybody from Winco that's listening, I'm not gonna give any more details on that right now. And so we hope with all these new initiatives, in addition to what we've been doing, we will continue to build on the success that was laid by my colleague, Dr. Clark, and then what we built last year, and we'll continue to build on. Stop that timer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Clark.
It'll come out in the update on Friday.
Hi, everybody. I'm Crystal Clark. I am well. And as you can see, EP, we've been working. And so as you look at the data from our most recent testing cycle, you'll see that EP 5th and 6th graders made positive growth in reading and math. In fact, we made the greatest percentage in CSD in growth during this particular testing cycle. And so even though there is growth and we are proud of that, we still do know that there is a lot of work to be done. And so Elkins Park traditionally has been a transition school here in the school district. And it's a very huge transition, not only for our students, but also for our families. And so we've consciously put in some initiatives to kind of look at the focus of the whole child and our entire community. So in speaking about our transition, ways that we looked at, ways that we could proactively support the transition of 4th graders entering our 5th grade space. And so at the end of last school year in the spring, we actually did something called Shadow Day, where we invited the schools, our K-4 schools had an individual day, and they all came and they were able, 4th grade students were able to shadow 5th grade students in the building. In addition to that, while they were shadowing, our 4th grade teachers were able to meet with our 5th grade teachers. So we were able to have some cross-grade articulation and discussion as it relates to important aspects that teachers should be aware of when the students were transitioning to 4th to 5th. We got really good feedback on that, and it's something that we'd like to grow and continue. In addition, we can look at all of this and really look at all of our quantitative data. And we do say that data is important. It does have its place. However, there are other measures to student success other than the quantitative data. And when we look at the whole child, we're looking at them qualitatively as well. And so when looking at the whole child and some of our qualitative aspects, we looked at our schedule. We were able to change our schedule in a way that we added something called the Eagle Hour. The Eagle Hour is 30 minutes for 5th grade and 30 minutes for 6th grade each day, where our teachers are teaching social emotional learning. It's a social emotional learning block, and it happens at Elkins Park for our students every day, 30 minutes for each grade. So it's not an hour each grade, it's 30 minutes each grade. And so in addition to our Eagle Hour, we've incorporated our SOAR Corps, which is more of like our student council. Our students are addicted to their phones, right? And so instead of doing selfies, we do something called Professional Self Wednesday, where you're taking your professional selfie and you're bringing your professional self to school. We're doing that as a staff, and we're inviting our students to do that as well. We've looked at that perception data of what the community, what students in the community are saying about EP. And we've included opportunities within the school day for equity purposes, so that students who are interested in certain types of activities and clubs that can't stay after school, that we do once a trimester offer some type of opportunity for those students to have experiences in those programs that they otherwise would not be able to participate in. We added a community liaison stipend position to a person in the school community, and he is supporting various programs. He's hosting lunches with someone special. We've been doing that once a month. We have parent mentors that are in the building now, and we're really utilizing our PBIS data to identify students who to be referred and to be mentored by various parents. And so we want parents in the community to know that EP is a place that you can come inside of, that you can come and see what's going on. And we have nothing to hide, and we have a lot of wonderful things that are going on inside of the building. And so instructionally, we had a heavier teacher involvement in creating our academic clusters. That's something that hadn't been done before, and it was an experience for teachers. And you know, if I could say something about the EP staff, we have a theme this year. We call it Game Changers. And you know, I'm all excited about game changers, but you know, change is something I'm smiling about, but the teachers are like, what are we changing? Because we know that the only person really that loves change is a wet baby, right? I'm a new grandmom, so all of my everything has something to do with children and babies. But it's true. I'm like, we are changing, and they're like, okay, it's almost too much, but it was necessary. And so some of the things that we've had to kind of change and look at, the teachers have really, they've risen to the occasion, and they've been very supportive and really open to just new ideas and new concepts and new ways of doing things. And so looking at how we were configured as a school. We did some changes this past year where we divided our 5th grade teachers into content specific areas and said they're also matching our existing 6th grade model. And that's something that's also a change. During that early dismissal Wednesdays, we appreciate them. And so we're using some of that 2 o'clock early dismissal time as a content specific professional learning community time, where our teachers are able to come together in specific content focus and really plan and come up with some structured assessments and ways of looking at the curriculum. And so it's aligned in a much more robust way. We have our tutoring, again, our 4-school tutoring, but again, really trying to empower and have our students have a level of identity in some of the things that are going on inside the school. We have a peer tutoring program that is run for students by students, and they actually meet in the mornings during that Eagle Hour time. There are small groups of students that'll come down to a lounge. We have an EP lounge now, if you didn't know, for students. The students come down and they are there and they tutor each other, and it's really wonderful to see. We have an added academic interventionist, and so instead of having a reading specialist and a math leader, we coined that term and that position as an academic interventionist. They work with both reading and math students. They're supporting students that have needs at a strategic tier level, and they're also part of our MTSS group as we're looking and discussing students and where their needs are academically throughout the building. We've streamlined our MTSS process to better inform our tiered supports and progress. We monitor and identify academic focus areas in ELA. And so we've identified together what those academic areas should be. And when we do our walkthroughs, we're looking for those, for evidence of how those specific areas are being targeted within the classroom. We've aligned our school performance measure to our school-wide growth goals, and so that all of our teachers are in alignment with what the overall school goal is. And so their growth goals and their overall performance will be based on how well we're doing as a school. We built in targeted interventions for special education and challenge teachers. And so they are also going into classrooms and supporting small groups of students with the schedule that we've been able to create. It allows for much more collaboration in those areas. And we've established some vocabulary goals for our encore teachers. So, you know, when we talk about school-wide goals, our gym and music and art and library, they want to know where do they fit into that conversation. And I said, so, you know, when you are in gym, I want you to introduce robust vocabulary to students and use it in sentences, and then we will we will target those particular vocabulary words. So we're using velocity, we're using equations, we're using circumference, we're using those higher vocabulary words within our encore structures, and then we're utilizing those words in the general classroom as well, so students have a real world connection to what the vocabulary that we're using day to day. And so again, Elkins Park is a work in progress, but we are on the move and we are game changing. And so come on over and visit and see what we're doing at EP. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Metcalf.
Good evening. Good evening. So I'm not Chris Berman, so I will not do the fastest sports talk that you will ever hear, but I'm not looking to beat any goals or records. I'm gonna give you guys exactly what you need, all right? So one of the first things, and just trying to evaluate our action plan, every year, as school comes to a close, our leadership team, we get together and we deconstruct things that we've done throughout the year and try to work on what we can do differently to make things better, right? And so the first two, analyzing multiple measures of data, something that we always have done, right? Always looking at different data points to try to support our scholars. And I think as a couple of the other principals talked about, it's not just around student data, right? We're looking at attendance, even class attendance. So it's a number of different measures that we're looking at to try to evaluate what our scholars are doing, right? D's and F reports. We're looking at, scholars that are being recommended also for MTSS. So all those aspects go into how we support our scholars. In regards to analyzing disaggregated data, again, something we've always done. I mean, I don't think there's a principal nowadays that's not looking at and disaggregating it to see how they can best support different groups of scholars, especially our scholars that typically perform in our below basic or basic categories. So the first thing that I say is most important that I want to go over would be just how to improve our MTSS program. So we've always had a team of teachers, staff members, but we've added a couple of people to our MTSS process this year. One of the most important people outside of our director of student services, outside of our social worker, has been our school psychologist, right? I think that's been a very huge addition. We've added some more teachers and they bring a lot of input. So our MTSS team has grown greatly. I would say the next best thing about what we've done this year for our MTSS program is how we use it. So the addition, normally we evaluate, our scholars based on recommendations that come from our teachers when we have team meetings. But this year, we've added this piece where when we have parent requests for special education, it goes right to our MTSS team, right? And from there, our MTSS team takes that request along with our scholars' data that that wants to be tested, and we're then creating a plan on how to proceed. And then talking and communicating with that parent. And this really helps us with trying to support the whole idea of over-identification, disproportionality, and things of that nature to really support our scholars and giving them an opportunity before they're evaluated to actually give them the support that they may need to no longer have some of the deficiencies that we may see. They are tough conversations with parents at times, but they're also good and positive conversations. Our parents get to learn a little bit more about our MTSS program. So we do always contact and discuss with our parents what that looks like and what we want to do and kind of get their permission for us to move forward. So we're very thankful for our families for entrusting in us with that. Common assessments. So we are definitely moving the ball with common assessments across all of our grade levels as well as all of our subject areas. And so thanks to the help of central office, Dr. Reilly has really greatly supported our teachers in ensuring that we're getting all those into Linkit, which makes it a million times easier for us to actually look at data from a number of different lenses. So that's been very helpful and supportive this year. We have some ways to go still because it is a process of getting those tests into Linkit and then ensuring that our teachers are actually giving them, but it also takes away from our teachers a little bit of creativity. So the use of our PLCs has been very crucial in helping our staff members create and keep their creativity along with those tests that they're creating for common assessments. The next thing to talk about would be our restructured academic seminars. So in the past, if you were a special education scholar who was in need of an academic seminar class, you typically would get one class that would happen, so for instance, math academic seminar would be 3 times out of our 6-day cycle. and it happens during our win time. We restructured that now to really hone in on what scholars need, right? And so now you would probably see in the IEP, it would say like 1 40-minute academic seminar class for math, or 2 40-minute academic seminar classes for math. And that now allows that scholar to, one, get what they need for their special education services and not giving them time that they might not need. And now they can actually spend time in their WIN class with their academic teacher, getting that support also with the classwork that they need. So there are some scholars that still get 3 days a week, but that's all now based on exactly what they need. That's for both math and English. Our PLC and team meetings, it's given us a lot of time to review data. I would say, just echoing what Crystal said with regards to our Wednesdays has really allowed us to do a lot more integration, right, of curriculum. So an example, our social studies teachers, how can you support us around text-dependent analysis, right? And so our English and social studies departments have had an opportunity to really meet on a consistent basis, and it's way more time. During the week, the 40 minutes, one day out of a 6-day cycle, one day out of a 5-day cycle, it's not enough time, right? Just to give you an idea of what happened, we did not particularly care about our text-dependent analysis scores that we received last year. And our first 2 40-minute PLC times for English, our teachers were really looking to create a common lens around a rubric for text-dependent analysis of what we'd be doing for the year, right? So what does a 4 look like? What does a 3 look like? A 2, a 1, a 0? And that, took up 2 periods, 2 times for us, 2 meetings for us to actually get that together. But that's the type of work that we're doing. And so having those Wednesdays allowed us to have a lot more opportunity for articulation and integration. Another area of, I would say, integration would be with our PBL STEM course. Everybody loves Omar. He does a really great job, really creative projects. And Omar's he's certified in math, science, and art. Right, so he's the perfect person. He's meeting with our math teachers, our science teachers, and just for an example, we were doing a geometry unit. Omar is looking to see how he can support that unit in PBL or STEM. So that's been very helpful in having that time and opportunity to really work with our teachers collaboratively together. Learning walks. So one of the changes we did with our learning walks this year, and I'll go back to small group instruction, but one of the things we did for our learning walks this year, last year, we didn't necessarily go with our teachers. We gave it like, hey, go do your own thing. This year we've had like follow-up, So adding that piece of follow-up for our learning walks to kind of talk with our staff members about, hey, what did you see? What are some things you're looking to add to, to your tool belt? And so that's been supportive. And, you wonder if teachers are going to come back with their authentic, needs, and they really have been very authentic on what they wanted to, do or implement. And I think even on some occasions, we're going with them, and then having a greater discussion to support our staff members. Going back to small group instruction, our WIN intervention times and enrichment. So normally what we've done over the past years, we created our groups right after the fact. This year, but prior to school starting, and it always ends up being a weird conversation for scholars, like, why are you changing me and moving my group around? So this year we were, ahead of the curve, and we actually looked at our PSSA data, and we created our small group instructional WIN classes based on that. The reason why is because we're never going to move kids if we don't move them out of below basic, and it's, I think the most difficult scholars to really support are those scholars that are trapped in below basic, because they have a history, it almost becomes a part of their culture of not having success, right? Academically, sometimes it's socially. And so how do we really support them and front load some supports for them by looking at data ahead of time? So increased rigor of assessments to match that of the PSSA. Again, our Wednesdays, please don't ever take them away. They are the most perfect. I'm being honest. So you don't realize just how much, an hour and a half, even the time we get, it's still not enough time. The teachers are asking for more time. I mean, sometimes we split them with central office, and they're like, why do we have to do this week? And it's just one of those things where, we're doing work from both ends, trying to meet in the middle. But our teachers are really, really using that time to create really rigorous assessments to support our scholars, to make sure that they're aligned to the PSSAs, really looking at the SAS website and other websites to get the most rigorous and also most creative type of ways for our scholars to demonstrate their learning. So that's very important for our staff members, and they really fight for that time. So other areas, PLN coaching. So the Penn Literacy Network, they've come in, they've really supported our staff members
Something that we've done always has been our advocacy for all. And with advocacy for all, we've actually pushed it back into the teachers' hands for the first benchmark, the second benchmark, the last benchmark, right before they take it. That's when the administrators, we now involve ourselves, and we do just a check-in with our scholars. We talk about their previous scores on benchmarks. We talk about what they want to do later on when they graduate high school, just getting to know them and helping them understand that we're here for you. And that really gives us a different look inside of them, and they look at us a bit differently also, right? Helps us form a much better connection. In addition to that, with the Advocacy for All, we've actually worked with Heather Scriven, because it's not just important for the scholars to have the data and for the teachers to have the data, but also for the parents to have the data, right? And so trying to get that message out there for our parents, because we have a lot of conversations and parents are like, wait, what am I child score? And I'm like, well, I sent this out a couple times. And so educating our parents on how to actually view their scholars' benchmark data, their PSSA data over years is very important. And that's a push that we're really working hard, because we have parents that are coming to us and they have no idea what they're, even though we send it home, they have no idea, what the score means. They don't know how to read the forms that come home all the time. And so that gives us those conversations to really support our staff members and teachers. And one of the things we're looking to do next year during our conference time is to have those our windows up so they can actually review with our parents, know exactly how our scholars have scored with regards to their common assessments and standardized tests. Community organizations, so around tutoring. So we're very thankful to have those funds to do that tutoring, but we've also worked with some outside organizations for tutoring. So we work with our local synagogue, we work with Arcadia University, and we actually also have some community members who are tutoring and servicing our scholars for free. So we're very appreciative of that. And that's been, one, it's relationship building, it's developing trust, but it's also allowing us to use other outside sources to support our scholars, right? And I think for our scholars and families, it's important that they know that the rest of our community does care about it. And then multiple measures, disaggregated data analysis of our programs is something that we're continuously doing that Matt and Brian have already spoken about. So that's our action plan. Thank you.
Mr. DeAndrea.
Good evening. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to be here this evening. So before I dive into the work that we're doing to best support our students around these measures, I just want to remind all of you of what Dr. Reilly shared at the beginning. So throughout the presentations this evening, with the other 6 schools, you've seen the data from last school year. And so the data that you are seeing on the screen now reflects, as Dr. Reilly shared, the 11th grade accountability data. So these are data for our current seniors. But what's important to note is when you look at the participation in these particular assessments, especially Dr. Reilly talked about the year that students received the waiver as a result of COVID. We know that in the 2021 school year, 2020-2021 school year, many of our students continued to be virtual. We were in a hybrid learning model, and as a result, there were significant opt-outs from the assessments. So when you look at these data on the screen, the Algebra 1 and biology data is primarily students who took those tests in the spring of 2021, and the participation is lower. When you look at the literature data, that's primarily from spring of 2022 when the students were in 10th grade and the participation was higher. Regardless, we know that there's a lot of work that we need to do moving forward. And again, these data just reflect what is happening in 3 courses out of dozens of courses throughout the school. And so what I'm going to share briefly this evening not only reflects what the work that's happening in these 3 courses, but really in our courses throughout the entire school. One of the things that's, I think, really important to share before diving into those specifics is one of what's been very powerful for us is last year, we decided early on to create a leadership team, which we had not had previously at the high school. And so all the administrators, all the department chairs, and all of our CEA leaders in the building all come together on a regular basis to focus on what we need to do collectively for our students, both inside and outside the classroom, and really help to build that collective ownership of each and every one of our students. As we know, the high school level, that collective ownership often looks very different compared to other levels. So when we think about the work and the development of this as a result of the work in our leadership team, as many principals have shared, we are consistently looking at multiple measures of data. These are just one source of information. We really know that there's a lot of other sources of information, not just student performance data, but as Dr. Pimental shared, a number of other things that we look at consistently as a school. And so our first step is let's figure out where we are and get a good sense of this data and really dive more deeply into the data, not just looking at the aggregate data, disaggregating it, looking down and drilling down to individual students and individual groups of students. And then for us, the core of our work at the high school level is really what happens in our PLCs. And we've really prioritized building in that time and also helping teachers to structure that time so that teachers of the same courses, when they get together, have structures for how they learn from one another. And those PLCs are focused on 4 critical questions. What do we want our students to know and be able to do by the end of each of our lessons? How will we know they've achieved those goals by the end of the lessons? What will we do if they haven't met those goals? And then if they, as we think about differentiating our instruction, what if they already know that information prior to the lesson? How are we going to help provide enrichment experiences for them? Based on that information and what's happening in classes, administrators are regularly circulating in classroom observations and providing feedback to staff. We also build in time periodically to do peer observations so that teachers have the opportunity to see other staff and learn from them. Throughout the year, not just in these courses, but in all of our courses, teachers in those PLCs, as part of that, how do we know if students have learned this content, we have opportunities to really look and dig into our benchmark data and then common assessments that would happen throughout other courses. As Mr. Metcalf shared, we've really enhanced our MTSS processes this year, which have been very powerful for us as a school, as we look at students who are not achieving success in these classes and other classes and looking to tailor interventions for them. And then we renamed our community lunch this year to be Lunch and Learn to better reflect that there's the component of we want students to eat, and we also want students to be able to have that time to really focus on their learning. And the other piece of this that's so important, and several principals have addressed this, we know that there's got to be a focus, and we believe very strongly in that focus on students' socio-emotional health and wellness. And so this time, not only is there academic support, but we also have other things that are occurring, such as therapy dog visits and other things to provide support for students' mental health and wellness. And so teachers have designated time that they, each week during those lunch and learn sessions, so that students can come in and get extra help if they would like to. Teachers are also directing and assigning students to come in and working with students individually or in small groups to provide assistance, and then using that data to help them inform their instruction moving forward. And then at the bottom, you'll notice that there are some, within these specific courses, some other things that we do to provide support. At the high school level, all of our English teachers are receiving support through coaching from the Penn Literacy Network. And then we also have online resources that we use with our Algebra 1 classes in particular. And then as we wrap up, again, right where we started, continuously analyzing our data and looking at what we need to do to best meet each of our students' needs, not just in these courses, but across the school. So thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you. That's all 7 schools. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate that. I don't know that we all really know, but we can try to appreciate how much time and effort goes into preparing for these presentations. So thank you for doing that. And with that, any questions from the board? Mr. Schultz.
I am moved by I'm moved by the leadership you all exhibit and how all of our kids have some adults in leading their schools that care about them, that are putting in a huge amount of effort to build out a framework and then put that into practice. It's just been amazing to watch over the past couple of years, this process iterate and evolve, but also see you all really master it. So thank you for the opportunity to get to hear about what you're doing, what you're pursuing. Please keep up the good work, of course. Honestly, I'll just leave it at that. I'm really excited to see what comes next. And just props to the new format as well. It's been fun to watch the continuous improvement on the presentation. The continuous improvement. It's very easy to understand. Thank you all for watching.
Thank you. I think Mr. Epps.
We walked through a lot of frameworks tonight, so I want to add one more. But it's important because as I observed, there's 3 things that came to mind, building on what Mr. Schultz said: authenticity. Each and every principal came up and acknowledged that there's a lot of progress that needs to be made. The numbers that we looked at, right, were not acceptable, but that's not the end of the day, but there's an authentic representation of what needs to happen. Empathy, everybody talked about, if not the exact words, but everyone talked about the focus on the whole child in different ways of doing that at different grade levels, but even within the building, different ways of meeting different students. MTSS, shout out to Ms. Keene as well. And then logic. We hear about the continuous school improvement process. We hear about what you all are focusing on in each and every one of your schools. And so and I didn't create this Elena Fagan framework, authenticity, logic, and empathy. Those three things are the ingredients for trust. And so that's what we all need. We need to have trust in you all as leaders, as our administrators, that things can get better and that they will get better. And so those three ingredients were very clear: authenticity, empathy, and logic. And so, as I've said to some folks, I put a deposit of trust because like Dr. Smith said, we sit here as board members, we also sit here as parents. And so my children are reflected in that data, our children are reflected in that data, and that's what is on my mind whenever we look at it. So thanks, and I'll pause it.
Other questions or comments from the board? Haywood?
Just want to thank everybody for your presentations. I really appreciated them. I do think that we are in great hands as you go forward, really looking at the right stuff in terms of continuous school improvement, as Mr. Epps talked about before, the continuing dialogue and continuing analysis and continuing caring is just really important. And that was very evident in everyone's presentation tonight. So thank you. I'll be watching on Zoom.
So, Mr. Metcalf said, I think it applies to all the buildings. The correlation between the behaviors, the things that we find in the MTSS and the performance, and how we're using that correlation, what we are doing to address the fact that the kids who are having behavioral problems are likely the ones who are also not having success in their academics. And that seems, I think we all agree, a root cause of a lot of the test problems that we're seeing. And on the other hand, a couple of buildings are doing really, really well with that. And maybe there's something to learn about what's going on in behavior in those schools, and how that might transfer to the schools where it's not happening as well. Second to everything else that everybody said about all the work that's going in and all the progress that's being made and all the hope that we have in the future because of your leadership.
Ms. Lohman?
First of all, I also want to echo the thanks to everyone for all of your hard work and your time and your commitment to the district, to the community, to all of our students. It's evident, and thank you for embracing the change, Dr. Clark, how it can be so difficult sometimes. And the thing that, one of the things that I heard over and over that really struck me that I think has been probably so important to this work is the inclusion of teachers in all of this, and the empowerment of your teaching staff to really start owning the solutions, if you will, and owning the evaluation of data, and really getting also the teachers to collaborate with one another. I think that's something, as a parting gift to Mr. Fishbein, I think that someone actually said, we had teachers asked to go see teachers in another building. So that, I believe you've been saying that for the 3 years at least that I've been on the board, so.
Saying that for 8 years.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be great if we could have our staff learn from one another. So, you know, that's a huge, huge thing, not to be taken lightly that's happening. I do have some questions. That's okay. Around sort of literacy in particular, because that's my area of interest, personal area of interest. And we heard a little bit about balanced literacy. We heard structured literacy, mostly at the elementary school level. Are those the same thing?
No.
No, okay. And what are we using?
So we have traditionally used a balanced literacy approach. And when we talk about a balanced literacy approach, we're talking about a block of time for literacy where students receive what's called a shared reading or whole reading lesson which is where a teacher reads grade level text regardless of where the students are. And they model for students what they should be doing when they're reading. So they kind of talk out loud. They speak their thinking out loud to tell students, this is what you should be thinking. These are some of the questions you should be asking yourself. Another component of balanced literacy is also, we heard people say SGI, small group instruction or targeted instruction or guided reading. This is where students are taught on their instructional level. So you can be in 3rd grade, and this may happen on a 1st grade level, because the goal is to grow and to move up. And you could be in the 3rd grade level, and you could be in 3rd grade and conversely instructed on the 5th grade level. So it's really based on student need. Another key component of balanced literacy is also students working independent. So they have to practice. And so in a perfect situation, these are 3 or 4 distinctly different portions of a reading block, if you will. And for example, while the teacher is working with one small group, another small group could be doing independent reading or independent assignments. In terms of structured literacy, the state PDE is requiring us, all of our districts, to have a structured literacy plan. All of our teachers need to receive, who are in the district need to have a certain number of hours of structured literacy and teaching training that we have to log in. And again, we have to have a plan. So what we've done is, and we actually did this before the state came up with the concept of we needed to come up with a plan. We made sure that literacy was a focus because everything that students do in all content areas kind of come back or lead to literacy. So what we've been doing with the Penn Literacy Network is we've been making sure that not only our youngest citizens, their teachers have additional reading instruction, but we're also making sure that that goes to the other content areas, the other grades, and making sure that all of our teachers, I know when Ms. Collins first started, every induction, we did a session on every teacher's a reading teacher. And so this is kind of taking this into a deeper direction, and it's a more concerted effort because everyone has to do it. And I echo what Mr. Metcalf said, having those Wednesdays approved has really been a big help to these efforts because, you know, we keep adding things, it seems like, and we're not adding time to do it. Those Wednesdays give us the additional time. And I know that we've had a little resistance, not a lot, but a little resistance to, you know, students being out of school, but research shows that the teachers being trained and being better teachers is actually a form of instruction for students. So we want to make sure that we double down on that time has been used very well, and it's been monitored by central office, monitored by the superintendent to make sure that it's meaningful time and that it's translating into something for our children. So we are moving into more of the science of reading and structured literacy under the new plan, but we were already headed in that direction because again, our board, our superintendent has been very gracious in sending us to conferences where we learn and we get ahead of some of the new and the latest things that are coming down the pike. So we just so happen to be ahead of this new mandate. And the same thing that Dr. Reilly mentioned around steels and the science standards, we have been on top of it, watching, waiting to see when things are coming. And so every time they give us a little nugget, we jump on it and make sure we get our teachers and our staff and ourselves properly trained and properly ready to move forward. So when it's time to go, we're ready to go.
Great, thank you for that explanation. I was gonna guess that structured literacy was like more like the science of reading, but I didn't want to assume.
Yes.
And also thank you for explaining how the Penn Literacy Network fits in. That was actually one of my questions, because I always keep bookmarked this article from the New York Times from Memphis about how the Memphis School District is using they're embedding literacy instruction in all of their schools, including high school, and this one was about how the phonics movement comes to high school in Memphis. And so this article was about how teachers in the biology class, you know, if there's a word that they come across that kids don't understand or know how to read, they know how to teach them now to teach them using phonics. So I'm glad to hear that we're doing that. I appreciate that. I do have some other questions, but I will defer because I think I'll say one more other thing about the literacy piece of this, or in this, we're about writing. text-dependent analysis, oh my gosh, if you say TDAs to kids, they're like, bah, you know, I don't know. Basically, I don't know if anybody else's kids are like that, my kid and his friends are all like that. And I appreciate, as a lawyer, I appreciate the importance of text-dependent analysis because it's essentially what lawyers do all day. If you're doing legal writing, is you're doing text-dependent analysis. However, not everyone's hoping to be a lawyer when they grow up. And while that kind of is, you know, important, and it's tested on the PSSAs, I do wonder where the place is for creative writing, for sort of a less structured type of writing, for research papers, you know, for just a variety of what are, you know, writing that's beyond sort of TDAs. Because I do know our kids do spend a lot of time on learning how to write TDAs.
So, do you have do you want us to respond?
I don't know. I'm just curious about
No, the reason why,
Doc, just real quick, because I'm going to be fully transparent here. Our principals have been here since 6 o'clock. I do believe it's important to ask questions, but I do want to push us to follow our protocol where certain questions can be forwarded to the president and we have no problem responding. And I'm just saying, I want to get them out of here. And I'm going to just be honest from that standpoint because I need them fresh for tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm finished.
No, I think your questions are great.
For me, I have everyone here, so I get excited. When I email it, sometimes it goes into the void.
Well, that's something then that we need to address because that is not what should be happening, which then forces individuals to feel that this is the right way to do it. And in terms of questions, we'll respond. I'm still being recorded. So it will duly be noted.
So just a comment and then Mr. Taylor wanted to jump in. Ms. Lohman, your concerns are very well documented. I have a really good friend who was trying to become a creative writing professor at a very prestigious university here in the area. And it was not given the attention. It's really not what it used to be. And so we have people like her and other people who are trying to bring that back to the forefront. So you're not alone in that thought that we've gotten away from writing for pleasure, writing for joy. So there are some people at the higher level who are working towards that. Mr. Taylor, you had your hand raised.
One comment I just want to make to your point, Ms. Sullivan, was one of the things that we've had great success with is our K-2 is around our very structured phonics program around foundations. And it has changed for the better how we're approaching phonemic awareness, how we're approaching word attack skills, how teachers are even saying to me, I never knew that was a rule. Like I never knew that was part of why we use this particular digraph with this particular vowel team. And so for them to have that learning and own that learning is great for the students to see as well. So the Foundations program is, to the article that you brought up from Memphis, that's really important for struggling readers to be able to have some skills to attack multisyllabic words so that they can break it down.
I appreciate you saying that, and I'm so glad that we have Foundations. I think that is such a great research-based tool that we have.
I'm just gonna add to that. And so to answer your question, we do have a framework that I think we're continuing to evaluate and revisit and make better, but our writing framework that was created by teachers and administrators during a period of time, there are opportunities in the schedule for students to practice a variety of genres of writing, whether it be narrative or persuasive. And then we also encourage opportunities through SEL in terms of journaling and reflection and just sort of like thinking about, so it's embedded and integrated throughout all of the disciplines, including, PE and art and music in those different places. So we know that TDA is important, it's being assessed. And so again, we're kind of thinking about how do we start that K-4. That's been a conversation with Panic last time. How do we do that K-4, but also making space and really spending time around that, right? That creative writing.
And just
Thank you.
showcase all of how.
No, you can.
Go ahead.
You're good.
I know you're trying to send us here.
I'm chairing the meeting and you're more than welcome.
Now we're excited. I just want to kind of bring it all together because coming in where my colleagues have had several years like this, so where you said you wanted to visit others, the foundations piece, if I look at our data, that 56% of our fourth graders scored where they did in science, but only 20-something% the same grade in literacy. When science is mainly literacy based, where is that missing piece in the continuum? And that's why we're going over to C Foundation so we can make sure. So it kind of brings it together.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you to all of our principals we chimed in there. Mr. Cohen.
This is rhetorical, I'm not looking for an answer. So several thought questions about how do you evaluate how programs or elements are being successful or working or not working? The second is, for those programs elements that are working, what are the attributes and aspects of those that make them work? And the third part is, how can that then inform for existing or new programs, how to then utilize that information to look and evaluate and modify and change existing or new programs for the benefit of the schools. And again, thank you for your service in my last meeting.
Any other board comments or questions? Still send us questions. I just have two real housekeeping quick, just to get it out there. If we could make sure this presentation, there are so many acronyms as always, but this one has a lot, and I learned SGI, a new one for me tonight. So if the first time they're used in there, if we could throw that in there, I would appreciate it as this presentation lives on. Is it there?
Well, no, not yet, but I made a note to add a glossary to the.
Yes, for this kind of presentation, that would be
So I will add that.
That's perfect. Thank you, Dr. Riley. And also maybe for similar reasons, a little more context on that CHS slide about the 11th grade. What is it called again? You know what I'm saying? Yes. Right. Just again, it lives on, and that's a tricky thing. I think I didn't know exactly how that worked until this evening, so I would appreciate that.
Information.
And I will quickly, Ms. Lohman, I agree with your sentiment of being excited to all be in the same room together. So it's kind of hard not to want to ask a million questions, which I'm not going to do right now. But I do want to just, a few things that I heard tonight that were exciting for me that I just want to kind of highlight quickly. Read alouds, yes, please. I had a high school teacher who read aloud to us. I know it's not an everyday thing, but I think everyone, adults could enjoy being read aloud too. So I love the idea of even our bigger kids still getting picture books or a chapter book read to them. That's excellent. Again, bringing content to a kid who maybe couldn't read that book themselves. So many good reasons. Building joy for math. We hear so often, oh, I'm not a math person. So I just love this idea of getting all kids excited about math, regardless of whether it's their strongest subject or not. I loved hearing about the science of reading. I loved hearing about the idea of a one book, one read, one school. Sounds awesome. A +1, Mr. Metcalf, the CBK, the data being in Power School. I did read that email, so I was able to see my kids, and I even checked before they were there. So I think a great way to get that information into parents' hands, guardians' hands, so they can be more informed about their kids. And I think I heard it from all different places about social and emotional wellness and educate. Like, I think we can't, while we've had to ramp up in a COVID, post-COVID, whatever this is, time, I think it's something that we can see the value of, that it can't go away, that we do need it, for good. And excited again to echo what some other people talked about, hearing teachers learning from each other within the same school, at different schools, wanting to, utilize those best practices is just really exciting to hear, because it's hard to ask for help. It's hard to admit that, oh, they're doing it better than me. How can I get better? So that's really exciting for me to hear. That is all I have. If there's any questions from the public, online, or in the room, this is your chance to ask or comment away.
There's no questions.
All right, I guess it is getting late. So unless I see any further hands, that does conclude. You're more than welcome. But again, thank you to our administrators that have been here all day. Again, welcome to our new folks. So glad to have you with us. And again, thank you to Mr. Cohen, Mr. Fishbein, and Ms. Haywood. This is their very last school board meeting ever, unless we have. Three of you again for your years of service and dedication, and asking those same questions, and finally at the last meeting, seeing the message. Thank you. So, thank you so much to all of you, and I will take a motion to adjourn.
So.
Joel, Fishbein second, Ms. Haywood, and we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, these cookies.